Hello everyone, this is Devin once again. Today we will be going over inserting bearing flats, motors, and axles. We will be primarily using the insert constraint along with a few mates, both of which were covered in previous videos. For reference, on screen right now is what your chassis should look like once you're done with this video. And on screen right now is a list of timestamps just like the previous video. Once again, if this is your first time watching, please do not skip ahead, but if you are returning, feel free to go to any of the timestamps listed on screen right now. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to open up the assembly that we made in the last two videos. If you remember how to do that, you can pause and do it right now. Okay, since we've gone over this many times before, I'll go through this quickly. But you go to the top left, press open. You navigate to where your tutorial is, mine or your chassis. Mine is chassis tutorial.iam. And once you're done with that, simply press open. And once your chassis opens, it should look something like this. So before we start adding any hardware to our chassis, I'm just going to go over a small little issue that you may or may not have noticed. So if you zoom in to where the inner C channel connects with the center 5 wide C channel, you'll notice that the holes actually don't align. In real life, these would align probably perfectly. However, in CAD, because we don't have wiggle room and imperfect tolerances, the exact dimensions don't add up to line up with the holes. In real life, this would be fine because screws have wiggle room and the parts aren't created perfectly anyway. But because this is CAD and everything is perfectly dimensioned, we will get these little offsets. Just kind of as a rule of thumb, if it looks like you could theoretically insert a screw in it and it's not too offset, it means you're good and that these you can put a screw through it. However, if this were like covering half the hole, then that's something you have to watch out for and you probably can't put a screw in it. But for this case, because they're almost close enough, it's okay. Now that that issue is out of the way, we can move on to continuing our CAD model. The next thing we're going to do is place down 4 bearing flats. Since you should be accustomed to placing parts, I won't go over it slowly, and if you are comfortable with navigating the part library, I'd encourage you to find the bearing flats right now. I'll pause shortly so you can pause the video and search for 4 bearing flats. Okay, so as usual, we will navigate to the place button in the top left, press it, and we will navigate outside of the standoffs folder and outside of the structure folder. So we are back in the Devin Ho's part library folder as seen on the top. And because this is a axle part that is used with motion, we will go under motion, and then we will look under shaft hardware because this is hardware that you use on the shafts. And then it should be the third thing on screen, bearing flat. Just click that, press open, and then we're going to click 4 times in an empty area to place down 4 bearing flats, and then press escape. Okay, so the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to insert the bearing flats onto the C channel. So we want these bearing flats to go on the inside part of the C on the 5th hole from the middle. So in other words, let me just move my camera. We want the bearing flats to go on this, start on this hole that I'm circling right now, or the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th hole. And then it'll extend to the 6th and the 7th hole, relative to the left. it'll be the same on the right, except you're going from the right. So just like standoffs, bearing flats have eye mates. So it's the exact same process as the standoffs. What you need to do is you need to click the bearing flat, go to constrain, again select the insert tool. We will select the correct eye mate. Make sure that it's the one on the correct side of the C channel, not the C channel, the correct side of the bearing flat. In this case, it should have these little 4 notches that go into the C channel. And then we select the correct edge on the work feature. It'll snap in place, and then you press OK. And then I'm just gonna move this over so I can repeat the process again. I'll zoom into the location, press the bearing flat, press constrain, insert. I'll select the correct eye mate and select the work feature and press OK. And there we have it. We have our first bearing flat. So with the remaining bearing flats, they will go in the exact same position relative to their edges. In other words, they will go on the 5th, 6th, and 7th hole from the left or the right, depending on which side of the chassis you are. If you are comfortable with inserting the bearing flats, you can pause the video right now and try it for yourself. Okay, so to insert the other bearing flats, I'm going to start with on this C channel. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to press the home button and then click and drag these to the other side just so it's easier for me to see. And then once we do that, I'm going to hover my mouse over the location I want to zoom in onto and then just zoom into the location. And then I'll slightly adjust my camera angle with the cube, and I have to zoom out again because it's too close. And then I'll just pan a little bit so I can see things better. And once again, it's the same process. You click the bearing flat, click constrain, click insert, select the eye mate, select the correct hole, and then press OK. And we're going to do this again. We're going to select the bearing flat, we're going to press constrain, insert, eye mate, work feature. OK. And then repeat the process with the other ones. And make sure it's on the correct hole. Again, see from the right side, 1, 2, 3, 4, number 5, number 6, number 7. So I'm going to go back to home. I'm going to use the cube to go to the other corner. I'm going to click and drag this bearing flat into a better location. I will zoom in to the location, readjust my camera, pan a little bit, and zoom out to see everything. Press escape, and once again, click the bearing flat, constrain, insert, eye mate, C channel. Okay. Bearing flat, constrain, insert, eye mate, C channel. Okay. And then same with the other side, I'm just using the pan tool to get to the other side. Going to click the bearing flat, constrain, insert, eye mate, C channel. Okay. This time I'm just gonna rotate this so I can see it and pan the camera once again. Bearing flat, constrain, insert, eye mate, C channel. Okay. And there we have it. We have the 4 bearing flats in place. I'm just going to go to the right side and just check to make sure they are on the 5th hole in the center. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's both of them. Going to the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's both of them, and that is correct. So I go back to home, and we are ready to move on to the next step. Okay, so the next thing we are going to do is we are going to insert two V5 smart motors into our assembly. If you remember how to place parts and are comfortable with navigating the part library, please pause right now and do it for yourself. Okay, so once again, we are going to go to place. We are in shaft hardware, so we actually want to go out of shaft hardware and out of motion. And there is, if you scroll down, within Devanho's Vex part library, there's a folder specifically for V5 electronics. Go into it, and then if you scroll down, there is a V5 smart motor towards the middle, the bottom. Click it, press open, select two places on the screen. I'm going to put it right here near the front and right here near the back so I don't have to drag it. Once I'm done, press escape, and we have the V5 motors in our assembly. So if you noticed when clicking the motors, you will have seen some iMates. Yes, there are a lot of iMates in this CAD library, so this should be easy for you. So in this case, we want the motors to be inserted on the 8th and 9th hole of the C channel. So remember, the bearing flat is on the 5th, 6th, 7th. We want these two prongs to be on the 8th hole that I'm circling right now and the 9th hole that I'm circling right now. However, we also want to make sure that the axle is going through the bearing flat. So we will have to strategically insert these together. If you are comfortable with inserting and creating first mates, you can pause the video right now and do it for yourself. Okay, so what we're going to do, just like the bearing flats and the standoffs, is we are going to click the motor. You will see that the two iMates appear. Press constrain. The first thing we are going to do is we are going to insert the middle, in quotes, the middle prong. The reason I call this the middle is because it's in between the axle hole and the other insert. This means that we can use this as like the center point and then rotate the motor around it. So in this case, I want to put it on the 8th hole. Make sure I select the right side of the C channel, or the one that's facing out. Click it, and then press OK. So you'll notice that because I selected the center insert on the motor, I can now rotate the other insert into the correct location and the axle hole into the correct location. When inserting motors, because we know that motors are 3 holes wide in terms of like the axles and the inserts, if we get the center correct, if, like how it was in the last time, the axle is in the incorrect location, we can just pivot around the center because it's the center. Which is why whenever I'm inserting motors, I always start with the middle. So once we get that, we are going to go to click the motor again to make the iMate show up. Gonna press constrain again, gonna press insert, press the iMate, and then select the correct edge on the C channel, and press OK. And then you should notice, if you move around, that the motor is inserted into the correct holes, and the axle is indeed going through the bearing flat. So, please pause here and try and do this on the other side. I will go over it, but for practice, please do it yourself. Okay, so the first thing I always like to do is I always like to go press the home button just to reset my view to make everything easier. Then I'll hover over the area I want to go to, zoom in, and then I'll just slightly adjust my camera, drag the motor down a little bit so I can see it, and then use the pan tool to go down. Then I'm gonna click the motor, press constrain, press insert, select the middle insert, then select the correct side of the C channel work feature, press it, press OK. In this case, it teleported to the correct location, so we don't have to do any rotating. So just select the motor, constrain, insert, imate, and then zoom in closely. And you'll have to, because the motor's covering, you'll have to kind of like fiddle around with your mouse until you see the correct edge and the arrow pointing towards the motor. Click it, press OK, and I will go back to home, quickly try and wiggle the motors to make sure they're stationary, and there we have it. We have our motors connected. Okay, so the next thing we are going to do is we are going to repeat this same exact process on the left side of the chassis. So if you are still uncomfortable with CAD and you still feel like you need help, just rewind the video to when I start placing the bearing flats again, because just like the last video, the sides are identical. So you can rewind the video now if you need to rewatch it for help. If you don't need help, then I would encourage you to try and do the left side of the chassis on your own, and then check with the video and images to make sure you're doing it right. I will do this silently just so you can see my process of CADing and how fast I would usually go. So I will just begin CADing right now. Okay, and once you're done, make sure to save your work. Please, please save your work more often than I have been doing it. Just go to the top left and press save, or if you like keyboard shortcuts, you can press and hold Control S. So this will be the end of part 1 of this video. In the next video, we will be inserting the axles in 2 different methods. And don't worry, if you're tired of imates and inserts, next video will not have any imates or inserts. So until next video, have a good day everyone.